It was a cold morning. The wind blew clumps of old leaves down the street, and the old mailbox creaked, that unpleasant, metallic sound that always foretells news. Bad news. Derek stood at the gate of the new house, his dreams. A large, gray-beige mansion with a tiled roof and a carved porch. The house, purchased from an advert advertising, a magnificent turn-of-the-century historic structure in need of some restoration. Small, it turned out, meant, prepare for a mortgage for the rest of your life. He pulled the mailbox flap. Click. Empty, almost. Inside was an envelope. Thick, sturdy, with no return address. The paper was yellowed, as if it had been sitting in a basement for decades. On the front, clearly written in ink, was, to the new owners of house number 657. Derek chuckled. Well, there you have it, he muttered. Even the utilities department already knows I'm in trouble. He opened the envelope. And the smell, of old paper, dust, and something metallic assaulted his nose. It smelled like an antique shop where time had long since stood still. His fingers trembled as he began to read. Welcome, new owners. I watched as the house prepared for your arrival. I watched as the movers carried your things, as your children ran around the yard. I am the overseer. The house needs watching. Someone needs to watch over its secrets. I ask you. Did you come here out of love for the house? Or out of greed? Take care of the children. The house awaits them. And the workers will soon find what's hiding within its walls, asterisk. A chill ran down his spine. He read it again. Then again. The handwriting was strange, hesitant, uneven, as if written by different hands. Maria approached from behind, fragile, with reddish hair, always slightly tired, but with the fortitude characteristic of mothers of 3 and 1 mortgage. What is this? She asked, wiping her hands on her jeans. I don't know. Some kind of letter. He handed her the sheet. She read it. Her lips turned pale. This is someone's stupid joke, Derek. Probably the neighbor's kids. Yes, he replied, though he already sensed, no, not children. The door slammed behind them. A draft blew through the house, and somewhere on the second floor, a light knocking sounded, as if someone was walking down the hallway. Maria winced. A draft, she breathed out. Of course, he said. Just a draft. But the strange feeling didn't go away. As if the house was listening. That evening, when they were putting the children to bed, the eldest, Ellie, asked. Dad, who's that man outside? He keeps standing by the lamppost. What man? Well, in a coat. Looking at the house. Derek went out onto the veranda. It was empty. Just the lamppost and the wind blowing a burrito wrapper across the asphalt. He wanted to laugh, but for some reason he couldn't. You think a house is just walls and a roof? You're sorely mistaken. A house is a living organism. It absorbs everything, smells, fears, voices. It remembers those who loved it and those who hated it. And if you stand in silence for long enough, you can hear it breathe. And today we'll tell the story of how one house in New Jersey inhaled too deeply. And how those who came to live in it learned the value of strangers' eyes watching from the darkness. And for now, a new creak came from the old drawer. And inside was another letter. You've unpacked the boxes. I see. Welcome home. New Jersey. A town where life flows slowly, where neighbors know each other by name, and a lawn is practically a religion. House number 657 stood slightly off the street, as if deliberately avoiding attention. Large, with a peaked roof and windows like eyes, it looked out at the world as if it had already seen everything. Family background. Derek Broads is 38 years old, a manager at a construction company. Above average height, he slouches slightly, like everyone who's used to counting not days but payments. Maria is 35, a former teacher, now the mother of 3. Freckles grace her face, her smile is tired but warm. They dreamed of a home. Of that one, where it smells of coffee and wooden floors, where children draw with chalk on the sidewalk, and the neighbors smile. After years in a cramped apartment, they found this mansion, ancient, spacious, with a legend. The legend, of course, didn't come with the mortgage. "The house is perfect," Maria said, crossing the threshold for the first time. "Yes," Derek replied, looking at the ceiling. "Except for the fact that it seems to be breathing." He said it jokingly. Back then. 3 days after moving in, the mailbox creaked again. This time, 2 envelopes. One from the bank. The other, without a return address. Maria opened it first. The smell was the same. Old, dusty, like from a basement no one had visited for years. She began to read, and her hand trembled. "You received my first letter, but you haven't replied. I noticed you're getting used to it already. The girl with the brown hair, she likes to draw, right? Be careful in the basement. It's damp there. I see you arranging the beds. The second-floor room is a nice place. My daughter once slept there. The house is waiting. It missed the children." Maria felt a chill run down her spine. She read it again. Every word was like a peek from behind a curtain. Derek took the letter and squinted. "This is a sick joke. It must be one of the neighbors." He went out into the yard. He looked at the houses across the street. No one was looking out. Only an old woman across the street, with a watering can, watering her cacti. She waved her hand. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Yes," he replied, trying not to show his pounding heart. "The house comes alive." That night, Derek woke to a sound, as quiet as a footstep. He opened his eyes, and saw the bedroom doorknob moving ever so slightly. He jumped up and threw the door open. It was empty. A nightlight glowed dimly on the stairs, and a clock ticked downstairs. He went down and walked down the hallway. It smelled of something old. As if the walls had exhaled the dust of centuries. The kitchen window was slightly open. "Damn," he muttered. "Forgot to close it." But when he approached, he noticed, the handle on the outside was stained with something dark. As if someone had been standing there, holding onto the metal for a long time. "This isn't a joke anymore," Derek said in the morning. "Maybe we should call the police." Maria stirred her coffee nervously. "And what would I say? That we're being stalked by a reporter from the past. Better a detective. A private one." He nodded. And then their youngest, Noah, his mouth full, suddenly said, "Who was that man standing at our gate last night?" The coffee spoon froze in midair. "Which man?" "The one looking at the house." "When?" "When I wanted water." He stood there, and then went behind the tree. Derek looked at his wife. Maria turned pale. "We'll close all the windows," she said quietly. A few days passed. The children began to be afraid to sleep alone. Maria heard sounds, like someone whispering from behind the wall. Derek began waking up at 4 in the morning, listening to the house. Sometimes he thought someone was looking through the windows. And sometimes, the house itself was looking through them at him. He tried to maintain a sense of self-irony. "You know," he said to Marie, "if this overseer is really watching, then at least let him help with the mortgage." "Very funny," she replied, looking out the window. "Tell him that when he writes about the size of our pillows. If he writes about the gas bill, I'll be friends with him." A week later, they found another letter. It wasn't in the mailbox, but on the doormat. "You're not listening to the house. The workers will soon discover what he's hiding. Don't disturb him. And don't ask questions. I see everything." Maria placed the envelope on the table with a trembling hand. "What does it mean?" Derek was silent. Then he exhaled. "It means one of us is lying. Or the house." But he didn't know that something far more terrible awaited him. Because the workers really did find the one. The workers arrived early. The sun was just beginning to rise, but tools were already humming in the house. The walls shook, as if they didn't want to be touched. Derek stood on the ladder, watching 2 men dismantle the panel under the window. One of them was large, with hands like chunks of brick, the other was thin and nervous. "Careful," Derek said. "This house is old, I wouldn't want to damage anything." "Damage," one of the workers chuckled. "Everything here is held together by prayer." He struck with the hammer. 1, 2. And a cloud of gray dust, smelling of time, flew out of the wall. "Look," the thin man said. "There's something here." They pulled out an old metal box, rusty but bolted shut. The surface was stained, as if someone had once handled it with wet hands. "Want to open it?" the worker asked. "Of course," Derek said. Although, to be honest, all he wanted was not to open it. The lock gave in after a couple of knocks. The lid creaked. Photographs lay inside. Darkened, stuck together by moisture. The faces were blurry. But children were visible. A girl in a white dress. A boy next to her. On the back of each photo was a neat signature. They obeyed. They saw. And also several letters, exactly like the ones they had received. With the same signature, Overseer. But they were dated, the 1950s. Maria entered, holding a cup of coffee. When she saw the box's contents, the cup fell out, spilling coffee across the floor. "What is this?" she asked, looking at the photo. "Old letters. From him. Looks like it." She picked up one letter and tried to read it, but the paper crumbled in her hands. Fragments of words remained on the floor: home, children, watching. "Maybe this is the previous owner's collection," she whispered. "Or, part of the house's history," Derek replied. "A history he doesn't want to forget." That same evening, the mailbox creaked again. Inside was a new envelope. This time, no name. Just a thick dot of ink where the address should have been. "You found the box. The house remembers. You're not the first. You're not the last. The workers have done their part. Now it's your turn to listen. I see you standing by the stairs. And the way she looks back at you." No one slept that night. The children were in one room, under blankets. Maria was in a chair, holding a flashlight. Derek was in the kitchen, in front of a monitor connected to a new security camera. He drank coffee and looked at the feed from the camera pointed at the entrance. Empty. Only the flashlight illuminated a patch of road. And suddenly, a shadow. For a moment. A human silhouette. Movement beyond the gate. Derek rushed to the window. Nothing. He reviewed the footage. A second, two, the shadow appears again. A figure in a long coat. Standing. Looking. Then he bends toward the ground, and the camera goes black. "Damn you." He breathed out. "Are you sure this isn't a recording error?" Maria asked. "The recording is accurate." "People, yes." "What are you going to do?" "I'll find that bastard. And if he's not here? Then I'll talk to the house." She looked at him as if for the first time she realized how scared he was. "You're already sounding like him," she said quietly. "Fear is a strange thing. It makes a person a detective, a philosopher, and an idiot all at once. When we're afraid, we search for meaning even in the creaking of a floor, the rustling of a mouse, the breathing of a house. We lose the ability to distinguish where sound ends and thought begins. And house number 657 knew what human fear sounded like. The next morning, Derek went to the neighbors. He knocked on the door. The same old woman with the cacti opened the door. "Good morning," he said. "Have you noticed anything strange at night?" "Strange? Well, except maybe you finally started saying hello." He chuckled. "I mean people. Suspicious ones. Everyone here is suspicious, my dear. Especially those who buy this house." That evening, when Maria was cleaning the nursery, she noticed a small stone lying on the windowsill. Smooth, with a crack in the middle. And in the crack, a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it. Written on it was just one sentence. "You have opened the walls. Soon the walls will open to you." He didn't yet understand what he had gotten himself into. And the worst was yet to come. The morning began with coffee, paranoia, and a new camera on the porch. Derek hadn't slept for the second night. His eyes were bloodshot, his stubble sprouted from his face like weeds from asphalt. Maria was silent, silence had become their new language. He dialed a number he found online. Private Investigator Harold Pearson. If someone's following you, I'm following them. Harold arrived in an old Ford. A man of about 60 stepped out, with a face you could sharpen pencils on. His coat was threadbare, and he was holding a cigar, extinguished but full of character. "Well, Mr. Broads," he said, shaking her hand. "Is someone writing you love letters? If this is love, it's very toxic." "The strongest," the detective chuckled. "Tell me everything." They went into the kitchen. Derek laid the letters out on the table like evidence from a TV show. Harold put on his glasses and studied the handwriting closely. The ink is old. A fountain pen. What do you mean? So this psycho's really into it. He's not writing for likes. Excellent. So it's romance. Or tradition, Harold said. Letters dated from the 50s. That's interesting. First thing, a neighborhood walk. Harold wasn't one for politeness. He knocked loudly and spoke bluntly. "Good afternoon, we're looking for a maniac who's been sending letters." "You're not him, are you?" The old lady with the cacti almost dropped her watering can. "Oh, God, no. Although." She paused. "My late husband loved this house. He always said it was alive." "In what sense?" "Literally. He said the house whispers. And when someone moved out, he'd write letters in their name so the new tenants knew the rules." Harold raised an eyebrow. "So your husband could have been the first overseer?" "Perhaps. But he died 30 years ago." "Excellent," the detective muttered. "So we have our first suspect with a permanent alibi. A man of about 40, named John." He smiled, but his eyes darted around. "I heard about your letters," he said. "A scary story. But I wouldn't worry." "Why?" "The house always chooses its people. If you're not suitable, it will kick you out." Harold glanced at him. "Does it kick out often?" "Almost everyone." Harold requested security footage from the post office. Checked the fingerprints on the envelopes. Nothing. No DNA, no traces. As if the letters were left by a manicured ghost. He concluded, the letters weren't spontaneous. It was a ritual. Someone was upholding the overseer's old tradition. "A house isn't just an address," Harold said over a cup of cheap coffee. "It's a suit. Different people wear it, but it's always the same." "Brilliant," Derek sighed. "We bought a schizophrenic house." Maria, meanwhile, had begun to fear mirrors. One day, walking past, she saw her reflection, and swore someone was standing behind her. She turned around, no one there. But there was a handprint on the glass. A small one. A child's. The children began to complain of whispers at night. Ellie said she heard a voice. "You won't tell them about the basement, will you?" Maria increasingly found herself talking to the house. "What do you want?" she whispered at night, touching the wall. And the house answered. Knock. Quiet. Like a heart. Harold wrote in his notebook. Every house is an archive of other people's sins. Sometimes the archive decides it's time to update the files. He told Derek of his suspicions. "I think there were several overseers. Each new owner left behind another. It's like a virus." "Excellent. We bought a plague barracks." "Don't joke, Mr. Broads. You don't understand what you've gotten yourself into." On the 6th day of the investigation, Harold set up a hidden camera by the mailbox. That night, it went off. A figure emerged from the darkness. Tall, wearing a coat. She walked over and put the letter down. She raised her head, straight into the lens. Eyes. Dark, without reflection. And a smile. The recording ended. The next morning, the mailbox was empty. But inside the house, on the kitchen table, lay an envelope. A detective shouldn't interfere. He sees too much. Careers don't like competition. Harold disappeared the next day. His car was parked by the side of the road, the doors open. In the glove compartment, only a cigar and a notebook. Last entry. A house isn't an object of observation. It observes itself. And chooses who will be next. Great, Derek said when he learned of the disappearance. We hired a detective, and he became part of the exhibit. Maybe we should leave? Maria asked. And abandon everything? And if we don't abandon everything, what's left? He looked at the walls. And for the first time, he thought the house breathed in time with his own. That night, Maria heard someone knocking softly from inside the wall. Rhythmically. Long. She approached and put her ear to it. Knock. 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 And then a voice, barely audible. Soon you will know what it means to be an overseer. This was only the beginning. The day began quietly. Too quiet, as it does in a house where every crack already knows your name. The workers returned to finish renovating the basement. Derek went down with them. The air there was heavy, damp, smelling of rotten iron. As if the floor itself had been absorbing centuries of footsteps, fears, and screams. Careful with that wall, Derek said. It's damp. It's not moisture, one of the workers replied, the house is sweating. He laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. They removed part of the paneling. Behind it lay brick. Old, dark, stained. There it is, said another. There's a dull sound here. A cavity. They began to hammer. 3 blows, and a chunk of the wall collapsed, raising a cloud of dust. A musty smell emanated from the opening, as if a forgotten crypt had been opened. Maria stood at the top of the stairs, clutching the handrail. What have you found? Nothing yet. One of the workers began, then suddenly stopped. He pulled a package out of the darkness. Small, wrapped in cloth. The cloth was stiff and caked. They unwrapped it. Inside was an antique doll with empty eye sockets and missing porcelain teeth. On the chest was an inscription in ink. They listened. And you? The house seemed to sigh. A door slammed somewhere above, and dust fell from the ceiling. One of the workers, turning pale, said, "That's it. I'm not getting paid for horror." And he left without taking his tools. That evening, Derek found 3 envelopes in the mailbox. They smelled of dust and damp paper. First. You have discovered what was hidden. The house doesn't like its secrets to be touched. Second. Now they whisper to you in your sleep. Don't be afraid, they're not ghosts. They're memories. The third, no text. Just a drawing, eyes. Many eyes, drawn in a child's hand. She stopped sleeping. At night, she walked through the house, listening to the walls. Sometimes she thought she heard voices, quiet, as if through water. They're calling, she said one day. Who are they? Derek asked. Those who came before us. Maria, you're just tired. No. The house is talking. The house doesn't talk. Who writes the letters? He couldn't find an answer. Because the question was the right one. The next day, only one worker remained, Randy, a local guy who considered himself a skeptic by trade. He returned to the basement. I'll finish, he said. I'm not scared. Better not touch the wall, Derek warned. At most, rats and mold are in here. 10 minutes later, a scream was heard. When Derek came down, Randy was standing against the wall, pale. There's a passage. They pushed aside the remaining brick. Beyond them was a dark corridor, narrow as a throat. The air was cold, smelling of mold and something else, sweet, rotting. Derek turned on the flashlight. On the walls are messages scratched with something sharp. Look. Don't close your eyes. He's near. Fear is an ancient feeling. It requires no proof. It simply is. Like the smell of an old house, like cracks in brick, like a whisper from the past. You can deny it, but the house knows the truth. If you're afraid, then you're already listening. At the end of the hallway is a small room. On the floor is a rocking chair, slanted like an old spine. On the wall is a nail. A sign hangs from it. Overseer's room. And next to it is a fresh candle. Burning. Derek dropped the flashlight. "Who's there?" he shouted. Silence. Only the crackling of the wick. When he picked up the flashlight again, the candle had gone out. Later, when he told Marie about it, she asked, "And what did you do?" "Left. Without a candle." "Yes. Let him watch in the dark. He seems to like it better that way." The next morning, the hallway was gone. The wall was intact, as if no one had touched it. Only on the floor were traces of dirt and boot prints, which they didn't have in their house. Maria cried. Derek was silent. And the children began to say that someone walked along the hallway at night, even though the door there was plastered over. Late that evening, Maria wrote in her diary. "The house remembers. We are only guests. A caretaker is not a person. It's a role. And it seems the house wants someone to occupy it again." Meanwhile, across the street, the postman dropped a new envelope into the mailbox. The address was the same. Only the recipient's name has changed. Maria Broads. New house watcher. Report #118/15, Westfield, New Jersey Police. Citizen Derek Broads reported possible surveillance and trespassing on private property. 6 indoor and outdoor surveillance cameras were installed. Over the course of a month, more than 26 anomalous events were recorded, unclear shadows, sounds, distortions of sound and light. No evidence of trespassing was found. So began the document, becoming yet another link in a long chain of bureaucratic indifference. The report made no mention that the complainant's wife, Maria, had not slept at night for several weeks at that point. Nor was there any mention of the children being afraid to stay in their own rooms. But, as we all know, fear doesn't count as evidence. The surveillance system was a last resort. Derek bought a kit at an electronics store, Home Surveillance Made Easy. The box featured a smiling man in a sweater. Derek would later say in an interview, "You know, if that guy had seen what we filmed, he'd have stopped smiling forever." Cameras were placed everywhere, by the stairs, in the basement, in the backyard, in the nursery. That evening, Derek turned on the monitor, clicked the mouse, and said, "If the overseer is watching, let him look at himself now." Nothing in the first video. Nothing in the second. And then, closer to the third night, the kitchen camera detected movement. A silhouette. Tall, blurry. Not a person, but not just a shadow either. A forensics expert commented on the video. "Probably the reflection of car headlights on the window." Mari's comment. "A reflection of headlights doesn't breathe." But this one did. On the 4th day after installing the cameras, a letter appeared in the mailbox again. The same thick envelope, the same dusty smell. "Now do you see what I see? Good cameras. But the house has more eyes." Maria showed the letter to the detective. He shrugged. "Looks like a prank." "A prank? Who knows where our cameras are? Or whoever installed them?" This phrase made Derek wary. He hired the installer himself. A local guy named Lucas. Lucas disappeared a week after the installation. Interview with Maria Broads, recorded by The Cut magazine. "After the letters, did you start to fear the house?" "No. I started to fear that the house wasn't the only thing watching us." "You think someone lived inside?" "I think someone never left." Excerpt from a conversation with a police officer. "We checked all the attics, the basement, the ventilation. Nothing. And yet the letters still arrived." "Yes. And you know what's strangest?" "What?" "The postmark was from a neighboring town. 20 kilometers away." In the 6th week, Derek decided to review the camera archives from the beginning of the month. The file for May 13th was missing. The file for the 17th was empty. The file for the 20th was corrupted. But one still opened. The video was 8 seconds long. It showed a living room. Empty. Then the frame shook slightly. A sound appeared, rustling, then a whisper. The words were unintelligible, except for the last sentence. "They can't see." Derek called the police. They were told to update their antivirus. "Do you think cameras bring security?" "You're sorely mistaken. They simply give you the opportunity to observe your own fear in real time. 2 weeks later, the family stopped turning on the monitors. The cameras remained on. The red lights flickered at night, like pupils tracking the movements of every body in the house. Excerpt from letter number 9. Now we watch together. Your children sleep peacefully. But you don't. That's good. The overseer must always be on guard. The police investigation was closed again, due to lack of evidence. Derek lit a cigarette on the veranda and said, "Maybe I don't know who the overseer is. But now I understand that the house isn't his prison. It's his body." And at that moment, the camera by the mailbox flickered. A figure appeared on the screen. Standing with his back to the camera, motionless. And then, as if hearing Derek's words, he turns his head toward the lens. The image fades. The streets of Westfield were quieter than usual. That suburb where the lawns are as neat as a conscience, and neighbors greet you with a smile but check your porch for trash. The Broads' house had become legendary. People whispered about it in coffee shop windows and sent photos in local chat rooms. It was even marked on Google Maps as the Watcher House. The neighbors swore they knew nothing. But their eyes said otherwise. Neighbor on the right. Mr. Langdon. 70 years old, neat as a tax inspector and grumpy as a Monday alarm clock. He appeared on the doorstep while Derek was trimming the bushes. "I heard you were having trouble," the old man said without looking. "With letters?" "Yeah, that happens." "Ha. It happens." He chuckled. "You know, the previous ones also said it happens." "The previous ones?" "Yes. Someone else lived there before them. But they didn't stay long. The house doesn't like being remodeled." Derek felt a chill run down his spine. "You knew them? All of them?" He looked at the house. "Only none of them have reached their full age." And he walked back, leaving behind the smell of old tobacco and a secret he wasn't about to explain. Neighbor on the left. Mrs. Carter. A typical suburban witch with 3 cats, sparse teeth, and a collection of porcelain angels that looked as if they were watching. She liked to talk without provocation. "You know, Mr. Broads, this house used to belong to the Farrow family. And they had children, too." "They did, too." "Yes. Only then did the children stop talking." Maria turned pale. "Why?" "They said the walls whisper." The neighbor smiled, looking straight at the windows. "And you listen to them, right?" In the city archives, among old newspapers, Derek found a news item from the 1920s. Headline: Career of 657 found dead in basement. The article was short. A man named Harold Wilkinson, a former gardener, served as the estate caretaker. He lived alone, writing letters to the owners, claiming the house talked to him. When they found him, he was sitting on a chair, holding a pen, and on the wall was a sign. "The house must remember." Maria stared at the photo of the faded clipping for a long time. Harold Wilkinson. "The first overseer," Derek whispered. "So what now?" "Nothing. We can leave." "Leaving means admitting he's one." "Who is he?" Derek looked at the house. The roof, the windows, the curtains, every detail, as if watching. Not who. What? That evening, Maria couldn't bear it anymore. She took a candle and went down to the basement. The air there was cold, like the breath of a dungeon. On the wall, an old, almost faded inscription, scratched with something sharp, read. "Remember." The candle flickered. And a voice. Quiet, as if speaking through time. "Now you see what I saw." She screamed and ran upstairs. Derek met her on the stairs. "What happened?" "He speaks." "Who?" "The house." The next morning, Derek called the mayor's office. "Do you by any chance have a list of cursed buildings?" "Excuse me, what?" "Well, you know, where you check the box, the house talks, the letters come by themselves, the tenants go crazy." "Okay. Then maybe a discount on a therapist." Towards evening, Derek noticed Old Man Langdon. He was standing by the mailbox. Just standing there. For a long time. When Derek approached, the old man looked up and said, "He chose you." "What?" "The house. Always chooses those who hear." "What do you mean, hears?" "The caretaker isn't human, son. It's an echo. It seeks ears." That night, the house became quiet. Too quiet. Maria fell asleep on the couch. Derek stood by the window. And suddenly a creak came from the mailbox. He stepped out, barefoot, into the cold rain. Inside was an envelope. Thick, damp, smelling of iron. "They told you about me. But no one told you I was still here. The caretaker doesn't die. He's just waiting for you to open the door." Derek looked up. A shadow flickered behind the curtain on the second floor. Human. Or almost human. And in that moment he realized. Not all the neighbors live outside. Sometimes fear doesn't scream. Sometimes it simply speaks your name, whispering from within the walls. Maria woke in the middle of the night. The silence was thick as syrup. And suddenly, a voice. Barely audible, but distinct. "Maria." She sat up, her heart pounding, the air sticky, as if someone was breathing right next to her. "Derek." No answer. Only the creaking of floorboards, step by step, down the hallway, down the stairs. She stood and walked to the bedroom door. A faint light shone through the keyhole. And the voice again. "Maria, don't sleep. The house wants to talk." Derek sat down on the ground floor, watching the security screens. His eyes were red, his hand clutching a mug of cold coffee. The monitors showed night. Empty rooms. Only in the nursery the camera suddenly jerked, the image flickering. Then a silhouette. Small. Standing by his youngest son's bed. Derek jumped up and ran upstairs. The nursery was empty. His son was sleeping. But the window was open. He came closer. On the windowsill was a dusty trail and 2 letters, traced with a finger. DB. His initials. "What do you want?" he shouted into the void. Silence. And suddenly, a knock. 3 times, like a heartbeat. Then a voice, low, rough, like an old radio. "Are you listening?" "Who are you?" "You already know." "The caretaker?" "I am the house." "And you are me." The monitors flickered. On every screen was his own face, distorted, as if filmed through water. He blinked, and the eyes in the reflection were no longer his. Dark. Empty. The house looked through him. Maria. She stood in the hallway, pressing her hands to her ears. The voices grew louder. Now there were many of them, dozens. Men, women, children. They all whispered the same thing. "Remember, remember, remember." She rushed into the basement, as if for salvation. But the basement was no longer the same. Where the wall had once stood, a dark hole now gaped. From it wafted a chill and a smell, sweet, almost meaty. Maria stepped forward. The candle in her hand trembled. There were inscriptions on the walls. New ones. Fresh ones. "The watchman looks through the blood." She screamed. Upstairs, Derek paced the house. He heard someone laughing. Childish laughter, quiet as a draft. In every room, a mirror. And in each, not his reflection. "Enough," he screamed. "Stop looking." But the louder he screamed, the more the house vibrated. Pictures fell, glass cracked, the air hummed. "You're not a guest. You're an extension. The house chooses those who listen. And now you're the watchman. When the walls start talking, it's certainly a reason to call a psychiatrist." But Derek had no time for therapy. The house demanded obedience, and the mortgage was still on schedule. And here's the moral of the story. Sometimes the house doesn't belong to you, you belong to the house. A camera from the basement flickered on the monitor. Maria stood before the opening, the candlelight plucking silhouettes from the darkness. Behind her, a silhouette. She approaches slowly. The camera flickers. The light goes out. Then the screen flashes again. Maria has disappeared. Only the chair, the same old one, with peeling paint. A letter lies on it. The house remembers. The house thanks. Welcome home, caretaker. 3 days later, the house was put back on the market. The ad sounded almost cheerful. A charming mansion with a rich history. Suitable for families who value privacy and the ambience of the past. A buyer was found quickly. A young couple. 2 children. They smiled in the photo by the gate. And only one neighbor, Mr. Langdon, stood nearby, smoking and whispering under his breath. The caretaker chose. Again. They say home is a place where you're safe. But if home can listen, who's to say it can't remember? 3 months later. The Broadesses were gone. No press releases, no interviews. They simply vanished, like people who realized the only way to defeat the darkness was by giving it their address. The house stood empty. The grass beneath the windows was overgrown with weeds, and the mailboxes were collecting dust. Sometimes passers-by would drop postcards in there, just out of curiosity. But the letters always disappeared. And no one saw who picked them up. One policeman, Detective McConnell, kept returning to the case. He didn't believe in mysticism. He believed in coffee, reports, and fingerprints. Any fear can be digitized, he said. You just need to find the right format. He found an old server where copies of the camera footage were stored. He opened the first one. Noise, static. The second, nothing. The third, a whisper. You're watching too, right? He froze. Then he quietly turned off the monitor. And in the report, he wrote. Materials lost. Technical failure. The sarcasm of fate, even police officers fear not mistakes, but memories. The neighbors were still whispering. Someone claimed to have seen lights in the windows at night. Others swore they heard children's footsteps in the attic. And the realtor selling the house told her clients with a nervous laugh. Well, you know, it's just a story. An urban myth. And the letters. Oh, that's marketing. For the atmosphere. The atmosphere, by the way, was truly palpable. Such that after viewing the house, the clients walked outside and got into their cars in silence. No one was saying anything, but everyone understood, it was too quiet inside. Autumn passed. The house was sold again. To a new family. Funny, simple people, a couple from New York, 2 children, a golden retriever, dreaming of a quiet life. A week after moving in, they found a letter. No stamp, no sender's address. Carefully placed under the doormat. The caretaker welcomes the new residents. The house has missed you. Don't be afraid, he will listen to you gently. Until you start whispering back. They thought it was a joke. They laughed. They even took a photo and posted it on social media. The post garnered thousands of likes. The comments fell into 2 categories. Oh, that's the house. Cool. And run. The post was soon deleted. And a month later, their profile disappeared. Houses are like people. They breathe, age, listen, and sometimes, they begin to learn. Each generation of residents leaves its own sounds, smells, and shadows. And all of this settles in the walls, like dust on an old closet. The house on Boulevard 657 no longer needed a caretaker. It itself had become a caretaker. It saw. It listened. It remembered. And if you stand before it long enough at night, you can hear. You want to go home too, don't you? It's human nature to believe that fear can be conquered with a light bulb. That if you illuminate the darkness, it will disappear. But light doesn't destroy the darkness. It simply makes it visible. Sometimes justice isn't retribution. It's observation. Cold, impartial, eternal. A home is just a mirror. It shows you who you are when no one else is looking. And if you don't like your reflection, the problem isn't the mirror. The old neighbor, Mr. Langdon, died 6 months later. When they were clearing out his things, they found an envelope at the bottom of a drawer. Yellow, like a dried leaf. And signed. Inside, just one sentence. I made sure they weren't alone.